Okay, it's time for part 3 of Bet on a Cowboy by Julie Benson. And this starts at page 139. Once inside her office with the door closed, she said, "What happened? You were doing fine and all of a sudden you changed." "I'm getting to know the women. What's wrong with that?" "It's coming off more like a group interview." Maggie paused and inhaled deeply. She sounded snippier than she intended. "Why," 140, "did her conversations with Griffin never go as she envisioned? Every bachelor started out a little stiff at the first mixer. If after 15 minutes he hadn't loosened up, she pulled him aside and she got him to laugh by telling him a dating joke. Then she flattered him by rattling off good qualities and why they selected him for the show. After she followed up with suggestions on what to talk about and sent him back to the bachelorettes. Maggie knew the routine by heart. She prided herself on her professionalism and her ability to never let any situation get the best of her. That is, until Griffin. Somehow she never felt she had the circumstances under control when he was around. Viewers can find the information you're soliciting from bachelorettes by reading their bios on the website. Spice things up or you'll put the audience to sleep. Give me more stuff like when you and the women were talking about making love on a horse. That was a stupid question. I know, but you turned that lemon into lemonade. I don't need dating pointers. From what I'm seeing so far, I'm not so sure." He glanced pointedly at her left hand. "And you think you're an expert?" Page 141. His words zeroed in on all her insecurities. "I may not have dated as much as you have, but I know that what the viewers want, and this isn't it. One of the women asked you about the ranch, but you hardly said anything. Do you know cowboys are currently one of the hottest heroes in romance novels? Then those writers have great imaginations because working on a ranch isn't all it's cracked up to be. It's mucking out the horse stalls, fixing fences, training horses. Mostly hard, smelly work. Talking about that will put your readers to sleep. Then you choose the topic. Just ramp up the sexual tension and romance. If we're done with the dating pointers, there's one more thing we need to discuss. The first thing you do when you talk to a woman is look at her chest. Then you flash her a silly half smile. Every woman except me, that is what she's thinking." "I do not do that." Maggie crossed her arms over her own chest. "I have film to prove it. You want to—" 142. Without answering, Griffin turned and walked out of her office. Griffin had no idea how he kept from throttling Maggie. How dare she lecture him? Sure, no one overheard their conversation, but it did not take a rocket scientist to figure out Maggie had hauled him off to give him a talking to, quote unquote, as his mother would say. Then she called him boring and pretty much told him to quit leering at the bachelorettes. How could a man help but look at that cleavage when the breasts were practically smacking him in the face whenever he turned, or wherever he turned? Women rarely upset Griffin, but the few times they had, he joked or charmed his way out of trouble. Not so with Maggie. Something about her made him want to dig in his heels and best her. She wanted him to spice things up. He hoped that she had a fire extinguisher handy because things were about to get very hot. For the next 2 hours he smiled, piled on the charm, tossed out sexual innuendos like M&Ms. He lost count of the number of women he kissed, but when he caught sight of Maggie, she still wore that sour, ticked-off look. There was just no pleasing her. Then forget trying to make her happy. He strolled over to the group of women he had to speak with and zeroed in on the redhead with an Angelina Jolie lips, and his gaze dipped to her glorious cleavage. He froze for a moment before he sank into the chair beside her. When he glanced up, he caught Maggie's gaze. She grinned like Avery did when she discovered something she could hold over his head. Then Maggie mouthed, "I told you so." That was 142 and 143. 144. Ever since he kissed Maggie, things had changed. He'd been flirting with and kissing the best-looking women, yet he found no interest barely registering on his meter. No matter how he spun things, he kept comparing the bachelorettes to Maggie, with the other women coming out on the losing side. Despite that, he narrowed his front-runners down to the lawyer, the opera singer, and the actress. Now all he had to do was discover their deal-breaker issues so he could choose the right finalist. He needed to focus on his goal, finding the perfect candidate who'd turn down his proposal. With only 5 women left, he couldn't afford to make a mistake, and he wouldn't let Maggie mess with his judgment. Quit thinking about Maggie. You have bigger worries today, like attending a rodeo for the first time since the accident. Page 148. After greeting him and shaking hands, Ty glanced around, noting the cameraman taping everything. Don't tell me you're the guy from the dating show that I'm supposed to meet. He's thinking, yep, that's me, the guy making a complete butt out of himself to earn money for his mom's cancer treatment. Time to cowboy up and deliver the response he'd written and memorized for this kind of on-camera situation. Griffin hoped he would say the words with more conviction than he felt. I'm this season's bachelor on Finding Mr. or Mrs. Right. I have got to say, I'm having the time of my life. I've been dating the most amazing women. On the most of the dates, he found himself spending the majority of his time fending off sexual advances. At the group date yesterday, Jasmine, who thankfully given up the cheerleading uniform this week in favor of the normal clothes, and it had cornered him when he left the John and suggested they go back in for a quickie, while Griffin considered himself more spontaneous than the average guy. A hurried tumble with the urinals for the atmosphere didn't put him in the mood, and he questioned the sanity of any woman who suggested it. 4 more weeks of this might land him in the padded room. He draped his arm around his date's shoulder, gave her a quick kiss, and introduced her to Ty. Pleasure to meet you, ma'am, the cowboy replied and tipped his hat. You two know each other? Here's what he's thinking. No, we knew one another's name because we got ESP. Here's your sign, as Bill Engvall would say. Ty grew up in Estes Park, too. 148, 149, 150. I meant to call you 2 years ago when I heard your dad died, Ty said. He was a good man. Sheer force of will kept Griffin on his feet. He dug the toe of his boot into the dirt, and has bad memories of the day washed over him. His dad was his biggest supporter and had always told him that if he wanted to be a rodeo cowboy, then that's what he should do. The only thing that mattered was that he was happy. Thanks, Ty, Griffin forced out the words. The other cowboy turned to Stacy. Griffin and I hit the rodeo circuit the same year. Griffin's date glanced up at him, excitement flashing in her eyes. You're a rodeo cowboy? What event? He was one fine bull rider, Ty stated. Out of his peripheral vision, Griffin registered Maggie's surprise as she stood some 20 feet away, monitoring the conversation through a headset. He hoped to keep that news private and could have if he hadn't run into someone he knew. Lady Luck was out to get him. Why didn't you tell anyone? That's fascinating. I bet you have some amazing stories. Sure, the sport was thrilling for the fans, providing an adrenaline high to participants he hadn't been able to match anywhere, but the job came with a lot of baggage. He could tell her stories of his various injuries and all the hospitals he spent time in around the country. There's not much to tell. Griff's being modest. He was a top contender for that bull riding championship. Ty cuffed him on the arm. You gave me a damn good run for my money. You're rewriting history. I remember me coming out the winner most of the time. It took me longer to hit my stride. I miss competing against you. No one keeps me on my toes like you did. I never got a chance to tell you, but I was sorry to hear about you getting hurt. Who would have thought a car accident and not a bull would end your career? Griffin froze. Damn. That was about the last thing he wanted the world to know about him. That was page 150 and 151. Here is 152. Maggie stared at Griffin and struggled to process what she heard through the headset. Griffin had been a bull rider, and a car accident had ended his career. No wonder he hadn't wanted to attend the rodeo. Competing in the national finals had been his dream, and she was forcing him to watch someone else chase after what he could no longer do. When she told him about the date, she suspected there was more to his resistance than not liking the rodeo. But she never imagined something like this. Why hadn't he told her about this accident? Would telling you make any difference? Those words that he had spoken to her was going over in her head. Griffin's words rang in her ears. What would she have done if he had shared his past experience with her? She had sympathized and apologized, but she wouldn't have changed the date. Griffin knew that and saved his breath. If only she could rush to him now, explain how sorry she was to put him in this position and tell him to forget the whole date, but she couldn't. Her job was about making interesting TV, and Griffin attending the sport he'd been forced to give up would have the viewers tweeting like canaries. She couldn't risk her job by putting her personal feelings first. You were in an accident? What happened? The model clutched his arm. The truck I was in crashed, but I'm fine now. Fine? Physically, maybe, but from where Maggie saw, not emotionally. He stood with his feet apart, his entire body rigid. The usual mischief in his eyes was replaced with a flat, glassy look. Not that his date noticed. What courage it must have took for him to be here. Maggie had believed him to be a carefree Casanova, but there was more to him. Why didn't he want to let her in on the secret? This is 152, 153, 154, and 155. How badly were you hurt? Stacy asked. Enough to end his career. Was the woman blind? How could she fail to see his body language that he didn't want to discuss the situation? Griffin and his posture was stiff, and his face pinched turned to the tall, sandy-haired cowboy. Who'd you draw today? I got Hair Trigger. Remember how mean Full Throttle was your last season? Griffin nodded and glanced to his date. That bull set a record for a buck-off percentage the last year I competed. Hair Trigger is worse, but he's a real fighting bull. I assume that means he's tough to ride? Stacy asked. Maggie shook her head at the woman's silly question. No, he's tagged a, quote, fighting bull, end quote, because he's a real softy. She read Stacy's bio and discovered the woman had a degree in theater arts with a minor in business. Yet, to hear her today, a person would think she needed a calculator to add 2 plus 2. Didn't she realize playing dumb would bore Griffin? Hadn't the woman learned anything about him over the past few weeks? Page 155. Fighting a bull is so tough that a cowboy only would give him to his mother-in-law, Ty said, pulling Maggie's attention back to the conversation. After glancing at his watch, he continued, I'm up in 10 minutes. Guess you two are supposed to be there with me, and they're going to film you watching my ride. Maggie flinched. Thanks to her, Griffin would have a front row seat to watch someone else chase his dream. Griffin stood by the chute. He shouldn't be watching this. He should be competing, and his body knew it. His heart raced. The familiar rush of adrenaline mixed with anticipation coursed through him, creating an intoxicating brew, making him feel alive in a way nothing else had ever done. 8 seconds doesn't seem very long, Stacy said. It feels like a lifetime when you're on an animal trying his damnedest to toss you off his back and stomp on you when he does. 8 glorious seconds where it was him and the bull competing, giving their best. Ty crawled over the rail and bounced above Hair Trigger. Griffin's date clenched his arm and said something, but he blocked her out, as he did everything else before a ride. When Ty climbed on a massive bull, Griffin went through his mental checklist. Wrap the bull rope tight, double-check it, shut everything out, breathe, and focus. 154, 155, and 156. Ty nodded and shot the chute open. The bull charged, then spun and kicked. Memories flooded Griffin as he watched the ride. He shifted the weight with the bull's movements as if he felt the animal underneath him. Hair Trigger flung him, and his head went from side to side, trying to catch Ty with his horns, and then spun in opposite directions. The horn blared, Ty jumped off, and the bull scooted to safety. The crowd roared, and the ovation rang in Griffin's ears. But the cheers weren't for him, nor was that 91-point first-place score blazing on the scoreboard. He pinched his eyes shut, trying to make that ache subside, but the pain wouldn't let go. Damned if the wound wasn't as fresh as the day the doctor had told him to give up bull riding. Once back in her office that night, Maggie discovered an email from the producer, and instead of going with a tropical destination as planned, he decided to film the last 2 episodes at Twin Creeks, emphasizing the show's Western theme. He ended that bombshell by saying he was leaving her to work out the details. She recalled Griffin saying in an early episode that he and his siblings each owned 1/6 of the ranch, and his mother owned half. Deciding that talking with Mrs. McAllister was the best place to start, Maggie pulled up the Twin Creeks website, searched for the ranch's phone number. The last thing she wanted to do was meet Griffin's family. It seemed as if the more she learned about the man, the harder it was to ignore her feelings. She dialed and waited for someone to pick up. When Griffin's mom answered, Maggie said, Mrs. McAllister, this is Maggie Sullivan. I'm the director on the TV show Finding Mrs. Right. You work with Griffin? Yes, ma'am, I do. She longed to barrage his mother with questions. Why did he work so hard to keep people at distance? What was it about his injuries that had forced him to give up the rodeo? Could he ever fall in love with someone plain like Maggie? 156, 157, 158, and 159. Usually we film the last regular episode and show the finale at the exotic location. However, this year we like to try something different and shoot the last 2 shows at your ranch. Silence. I'll be honest with you, Mrs. McAllister finally said. I don't approve of my son being on your show. I told him straight out it was not the way to find a wife, but he's always been headstrong, and there's no talking him out of it. Maggie laughed. He does like having things his way, doesn't he? and he has an arsenal of tricks to accomplish that. But I stand my ground. You do that. Too many women give in to Griffin because he's got a pretty face and a glib tongue. He needs someone to keep him in line. Oh, no, that didn't sound right at all. Fearing his mother had got the wrong impression, Maggie rushed to clear up the misunderstanding. I meant that I stand up to him in our business dealings. Ours is nothing more than a working relationship. Working relationship. How had she gotten those words out without choking on that lie? She's thinking in her mind, we've kissed and I'm more than halfway in love with him. How could she hide her feelings from his family? Talk about asking for trouble. What would filming involve? Primarily, we need footage of Griffin introducing some of his dates around Twin Creeks. I don't see any reason to let you film here. While Griffin agreed to be on your show, the rest of the family didn't sign on for the ride. We'd pay you to film at the ranch. Maggie quoted a generous figure. Now that changes things. Obviously, Griffin wasn't the only one who was motivated by money. For you to film on our ranch, I like a certain area of the house off limits, like the bedrooms and my older son's office. Mrs. McAllister continued, even if Griffin is talking to someone, you can't film in those rooms. That's not a problem. Maggie wasn't happy about the condition, but she recognized where Griffin got his stubbornness and realized she needed to choose her battles. When they shot a commercial here, people were transpassing all over. And you need to remember, this is a working ranch, and I don't want you interfering with our tours. 158, 159, 160. Maggie assured Griffin's mother they wouldn't interrupt the ranch's business, especially since everyone would stay in their cabins at Mary's Lakes Lodge. Then she said she'd add what they talked about during the show's standard contract and courier it to her. I look forward to meeting you, Maggie added out of politeness rather than the true sentiment. I have one more question for you. How's Griffin doing? It's so hard to tell watching him the show. He's evasive when we talk. A mother's concern for her child, laced with a woman's voice. She's thinking. Griffin's distant and reserved. He puts on a show for being happy to be here, but he refuses to let anyone see the real him. Instead, he plays the carefree playboy. But what could she tell his mother? I think he's doing well. But I suspect he's not happy, and none of the bachelorettes are good enough for him. Maggie couldn't envision Griffin spending his life with any of them. The actress was too serious. All she talked about were her goals, and how acting was a stepping stone to the bigger and better things. All the lawyer talked about was cases she won and how she was on the fast track to partnership. But if that was true, why would her law firm let her take a leave of absence for 3 months plus? The opera singer couldn't go half an hour without checking her makeup. She worried about whether or what not the cameraman were capturing her best side. She demanded everyone's attention from the minute she floated into a room. A lot of diva for never having landed anything but roles in the chorus, and none of them made Griffin laugh. I'm anxious to meet the women he selected, his mother was saying, but I'm giving you fair warning. I'm not one to keep my opinions to myself, and you might not like what I have to say. That's fine. Maybe Griffin's mother would see how wrong the finalists were for him, and she could say all the things Maggie couldn't. A girl could always hope. That's 160, 161. At the bottom of 162. Griffin snatched his iPhone off the nightstand and called her. When she answered, he said, I need to talk to you. We can talk at the key ceremony the next afternoon. It can't wait. 163. Griffin, it's 6:30 and I haven't even gone off on my run yet. That's perfect. I'll run with you and we can talk. No. He gripped the phone so tight he expected it to crumble in his hand. Please, it's important. Silence met his request. Then Maggie sighed and floated across the phone lines. I'll text you my address. As he drove through the quiet Las Vegas residential streets to where she was staying, he tried to push aside the ache gnawing at him. How could he forget now that he relived the rush, the excitement of sense of accomplishment that he felt when he was bull riding? After parking in the driveway of that modest ranch house, he wondered what he should say to Maggie when she answered the front door dressed in sweatpants, a baggy NYU sweatshirt that reached mid-thigh, and spotless white tennis shoes that he still didn't know. They set out on a faster pace than he expected, but the exercise felt good and crisp. The air cleared his head. I wasn't going to talk about my rodeo career or the accident. Are you embarrassed? You shouldn't be. 162, 163, 164. Easy for Maggie to say. People wouldn't look at her with pity and gossip about how he hadn't done anything worthwhile with his life since the accident. I checked the latest tweets and chats. Women are concerned because you're not opening up. They aren't seeing the real you. Yesterday you shared something personal. I didn't. Ty did, and he had no right to. Unbearable to hear her searching gaze, or need he felt to open up to her, he stared at the road ahead. I don't want stuff about Dad's death or my accident aired. You don't need it. Cut it. I can't. People at home know that's off limits. He paused now. Every tourist come to the ranch will ask about it. Ignore them, Maggie insisted. That didn't work with you. Frustrated with talking in short bursts, he slowed to a walk. Have people ever looked at you with pity? It sucks. She stumbled, and he reached out to steady her. At age 11, I towered over my classmates, she admitted. I was clumsy, skinny, and wore thick glasses. My mom couldn't afford contacts. I bought them with babysitting money. When people looked at me, I knew they were thinking, you poor thing. A picture of Maggie, all arms and legs, with glasses emphasizing her sharp facial features, flashed in his mind. From her pained look, he guessed the kids must have been brutal, probably calling her names like Beanpole and Hawkface. His heart twisted for what she must have gone through, which was so different from his own experience in school. Then you understand, I don't want people looking at me like that. Viewers will admire you for surviving and coming out better for it. Better? He worked on his family's ranch, not managing the finances like Rory, but mucking out the stalls and fixing fences. He'd been unable to add to the family coffers in the meaningful way that until this damn reality show. Maggie must have lost her mind. You're wrong. I'm not a better man. He clasped her hand, halting them. Before my accident, I was a contender for the bull riding championship. I had a shot at major endorsements. Now I'm nothing but a ranch hand. Though he tried to keep her at distance, Maggie saw past his defenses, the way no one ever had, and despite knowing better, he come to care for her, damned if he knew why. 164, 165, and 166. Our viewers will sympathize with you. A lot of people have coped with broken dreams. He released her hand. I don't want any sympathy. I won't be a spokesman for the Shattered Dreams Club. Scrap the footage. I can't. The editor goes through the film daily. He already seen the rodeo footage. It's out of my hands. All Griffin could do now was salvage some of his pride. He flashed Maggie what he hoped was an I don't give a damn look. You can't blame a guy for trying. Admit it. I almost had you there for a moment. You're not fooling me. I see how much this hurts you. When she reached out to him, he jogged away. If she touched him, he worried what he might say or do. A few seconds later, she caught up with him. Whenever things don't go your way, you act like you never cared. I don't buy it. He kept jogging, refusing to admit how on target she was, but stopped when her house came into view. He wasn't the only one hiding something. He pointed to her baggy sweatshirt. And you hide behind ugly clothes. What are you afraid of? Don't change the subject. We're talking about how you feel. You want to know? He shoved his fists into his jacket pockets, his anger making him want to run until he dropped. I hate the world knowing what I went through. It hurts like hell. I had to give up the only thing I ever wanted to do and the only thing I was good at. Then 3 years after my accident, when my dad died, I couldn't save him. He never told anyone how guilty he felt over his father's death. The memories hammered him. They'd been mending fence in the far pasture. His dad had been fine 1 minute and on the ground the next. When Griffin failed to find a pulse, all he could do was dial 911. By the time the paramedics arrived, his dad was gone. What happened? He had a heart attack. If I had known CPR, I could have saved him. You don't know that for sure. At least I could have done something other than sit there waiting for the ambulance. With tears flowing down her face, Maggie wrapped her arms around Griffin's waist and pulled him against her, rubbing his back as she told him to forgive himself. That's what his dad would want him carrying this burden around. He wouldn't want him carrying this burden around. Her warmth, her concern wrapped around Griffin like a comfort blanket. 166, 167, and 168. Maggie was one of those women who helped a guy when life had hard knocks sent to him, the cold, hard ground for better for worse kind of gal, who actually meant the words. Everything inside him froze. He hoped he resembled a goodbye and ran for his car. Things had gotten way out of control. Okay, and we're still going. 168, 169, 170. Maggie sat on the overstuffed sofa in her living room of the rental house, a cup of maple tea, and on her computer, the rustic coffee table in front of her, the guilt swirling inside her. She hurt Griffin today by dredging up memories of his accident leaving the rodeo, and hurt his father. In 2 weeks she would hurt him further by airing the episode. She'd have given him anything to help him. no, that wasn't true. She refused to risk her job by going to the higher-ups and trying to get them to cut the footage. She had to put her dream of motherhood above his feelings and try to convince Griffin that things wouldn't be that bad. For a moment he almost trusted her, allowed her to comfort him, and she attempted to ease his guilt over with his father's death. Then just as quickly he closed himself off. And tomorrow he would pretend as if nothing had happened. That's what he did whenever she got close. More than likely she'd pretend that too, because it was safer for the both of them. This season had been an odd contradiction. They taped 5 shows, then aired the episodes had received the highest ratings in the program's history. Online chats went crazy debating whether or not the cheerleader outfit was a smart attention grabber or reeked of desperation. At the last key ceremony, after Maggie gave Griffin the okay, he eliminated the teacher, and in 2 weeks, when the episode aired, the website would launch a survey asking if people thought he made the right decision or if he made a big mistake. The season was a shining success, but at what cost? Trying to get her mind on anything but Griffin, Maggie pulled up her notes for the group date tomorrow, staring at them for 5 minutes before she gave up and connected to the internet. When the Google screen appeared, she typed in Griffin's name and hit search. She read various articles about his numerous bull riding wins from the moment he entered the sport. He'd been identified as a cowboy who was going places. She cringed every time she read about an injury he received competing, and there was too many broken bones, concussions, injured spleen. Most of the stories speculated on when, or if, not if, he'd win that championship. Then she found the article about the accident that had ended his career. His father had suffered a heart attack while driving, lost control, and rolled the truck. She read further. For a while the doctors had worried that Griffin wouldn't survive. He'd undergone surgery, but she couldn't locate the particulars. None of the articles divulged what about his injuries prevented him from returning to bull riding. Why would Griffin think anyone would look at him with pity? What he survived spoke volumes about his character. Why couldn't he see that? And he hid all that pain under a carefree facade. Moving forward. Page 182. Let me catch you up on what happened. She gets a phone call during the middle of the night that one of the girls, which is the cheerleader, was trying to get into Griffin's house. And they're not even supposed to know where he lives, yada, yada, yada. So she comes over there to straighten the issue out. Why did you let her in at all? Why didn't you tell her to go away? Why didn't you call? If you want me to answer, Maggie, you'll have to take a break in between questions. He pulled out a bar stool. Sit. I don't appreciate you issuing commands like I'm a puppy. She snapped on the third lap around the kitchen. I'm sorry. Please have a seat. I'm willing to talk about this, but you're making me dizzy. She stopped and considered protesting again, mainly out of spite, but decided to comply with his request. Why are you so quick to assume the worst? He asked. Is it me, or are you this tough on all men? That stung. Was she harder on him than all the other bachelors she worked with? No. She just called him on his stunts. What bothers you is that I have expectations and hold you to them. I don't let you skate through life on your good looks. His face tight with anger, his posture stiff, Griffin said, I let Jasmine in because she was drunk. When I didn't open the door at first, she started screaming my name. If I had not dragged her inside, the neighbors would have called the police. Maggie had not thought of that. In her business, they claimed that any publicity was good publicity, but she wasn't sure having the police arrive to find a naked bachelorette at Griffin's house would turn out so well. Maggie's anger dissipated and the tightness in her shoulders eased. Thank you for that. We can't afford to alienate the neighbors. I must have heard you wrong because that sounded like an apology. Why is that so hard to believe? Most women I know aren't so quick to admit a mistake. Once again, that doesn't speak well of the ones you know. Maggie cleared her throat and directed the conversation back to tonight's incident. Hopefully nothing like this will happen again. But if it does, call me. It's my job to manage problems, and just so you know, I'll be putting Jasmine on a plane tomorrow. 182, 183, 184. That seems a little harsh, considering the state of the world. Well, while we realized that on some of the destination dates the couple could, Maggie blushed. Yes, Griffin taunted, obviously enjoying seeing her squirm. While we realize that couples may become intimate, it's the bachelorette contract that they're not to have contact with you outside of the arranged dates. If they do, they're in breach of contract and they must leave immediately. You don't mind us doing the deed, you just want us to happen during a date? Isn't that hypocritical? Maggie flinched. She thought the show's whole premise was hypocritical. But once again she spouted the party line. That's not what I meant, and you know it. If we allowed contact outside the scheduled date times, people would complain the show was unfair. Because with all the scripting telling me who to keep around and for how long, it's so fair now. Page 185 and 186. By the way, your contract states that you are not to have contact with the bachelorettes outside of date times either. Believe it or not, I read my contract and the information you gave me, and contrary to what you may think, I don't sleep with every woman within a 50-foot radius. Just every attractive woman. He downed the rest of his beer. Why do you ride me so hard? I'm sorry, I overreacted. I was frustrated about having to deal with this, and I took it out on you, Maggie admitted. Griffin didn't seem upset that she spoiled his tryst with the cheerleader, but maybe he was just placating her. A little voice inside her laughed at the uncertainty. Here's what she's thinking. He helped get rid of the cheerleader because he couldn't salvage the situation. He sided with you to get out of trouble. After all, Griffin played women like Maggie played chess, efficiently and with determination. But he was smart enough to know when he lost the game. Let's have some fun, Maggie. She froze by the abrupt change in their conversation. Fun. She remembered the cheerleading saying that she and Griffin could have some fun. Hopefully he didn't mean that. Excuse me. I want you to forget about what happened tonight. I'm tired of being on camera and thinking about every word I say. I have a room full of video games, but no one to play with. She swallowed hard and her pulse spiked. Playing with him brought an array of intoxicating images to mind, revolving around her wearing nothing but a trench coat and high heels and playing a different kind of game. Maggie inhaled and counted to 10 while trying to locate her willpower and slow her heart rate, and stopped her fantasizing about Griffin. She glanced at him. Impossible. If she lived to be 100, she'd still dream about him. Right now, all I want to do is put my feet up and beat the tar out of someone, a Super Smash Brothers brawl, and you're the lucky opponent. When she hesitated, he continued, Come on, be a pal. He saw her as a friend while she created a vivid fantasy life around him. How sad was that? She heard similar comments before and had grown accustomed to them, or so she thought. His invitation meant nothing. Stay, her little voice chided. There was nothing to worry about, and when would she get a chance to spend time alone with Griffin again? What makes you think you'll beat me? I play video games as well as I play pool, Maggie said as she followed him through the house. Once in the game room, they sank onto the leather couch where she chose King Didi for her character. He said, You don't want to be one of the princesses? That's not my style. King Didi looks like a penguin, and I love penguins. Griffin chose Captain Falcon because it reminded him of Captain Solo on the Millennium Falcon. They started with a coin battle. Maggie's character pummeled Griffin's, sending coins flying everywhere. She scooped them up until halfway through the game she held a good lead, and while Griffin stewed and complained. I'm going to catch up, you know, he said. You think you can surprise me with a great comeback? Not hardly. I'm ahead by 100 coins. His eyes widened, and then that patented to-die-for smile spread across his face, revealing his dimples. He leaned closer. Maggie, I could surprise you more ways than you've never imagined. She bet he could, no doubt about it. 186, 187, here comes 188. Her palms grew sweaty, her body tingled, and heat rushed to places that she'd forgotten existed. In her mind, she's thinking, say something, break the spell before things go any farther. Then I'll have to put you in your place. His grin widened, extremely poor choice of words. An image of him above her flashed in her mind. I'll put you in your place by beating you at the game. You are not going to beat me. What's the big deal? You worried that if you lose, they'll revoke your man card? His eyes darkened and his gaze swept over her. Fireworks burst through her body. That's it, Maggie girl. I warned you about questioning my manhood again. And with that ends tonight's book reading. So we've got a little bit more to go, which is good, right? And I know you're going to be wanting to know what happened. Does he actually choose the ugly duckling, or does he choose one of the swans? Will his mother make her presence known? How will his family act? All this and more on the next part of Bet on a Cowboy. Stay tuned.